Okay, so what I want to show you now that we've added this deployment to MS1, let's go ahead and start up Managed Server 1, and I'll show you how to access the application that's now running on MS1. So let's switch over to the terminal window again. And in this window, let's go ahead and start up Managed Server 1. So if you recall from the Managed Servers lab, we run the start managed WebLogic script, and we specify the name of the managed server we want to start and the URL to the admin server. Okay, so what just happened? We've deployed the application to the Managed Server 1 using the admin console, but the managed server was offline. So the application wasn't technically deployed to Managed Server 1 since it wasn't running. As soon as Managed Server 1 started and connected to the admin server pushed that application out to the managed server. And that process is defined by the deployment behavior that we picked when we deployed the application. Recall that we specified the staging mode. So in staging mode, the admin server will push out the application to each of the targets. And in this case, the admin server copied the application to MS1. And then on startup, MS1 initialized the application. And that's why we have a browser pop-up for that application. So if you take a look at my address bar, if you've noticed before, the admin server is running on localhost 7001. I've got a funky DNS setup in my environment, and it used this different IP address. But in your environment, you should be able to do http:// in the listen address for your managed server 1, which, if it's on the same machine as the admin server, is also localhost. Recall that the port for the managed server is 8001. And go ahead and enter. And you'll see that this page does load. And you've now accessed this application in two places. So we've deployed it to the admin server and accessed it there. And we've got it running on Managed Server 1 and we've accessed it there as well. So great, fantastic. Let me show you what I've already described what staging mode does. So the admin server copies the application files to each of the targets. So let me show you what that looks like. Go ahead and minimize your browser and go back to the terminal window. I'm going to open up a new window. And what you want to do is go to your domain home. So go to the demo domain directory and go into the servers directory. Now, if you recall, each WebLogic server has its own directory. So we have one for the admin server and one for MS1. Inside MS1, you'll find a stage directory. It is here that the admin server will copy the application files. So you can see in the staging directory that we have main web app. This is the actual deployment that the managed server is running with. And we can also go up and take a look at the admin server and its stage directory. You'll notice that there's no main web app here. The admin server's default deployment strategy is to run the application from where it was deployed from. For managed servers, it's different. So managed servers use staging mode by default. The admin server's default staging mode is no stage. And so it is loading the files locally from where they were deployed. Okay, so let's switch back to the admin console. So go ahead and click on the Control tab. And on the Control tab, I can start and stop an application. I can also do this from the deployments page. So if I check a box here next to the application and you click on Start, you can see that I can service all requests, which means that this application is available to anyone that can connect. And I can also specify servicing only administration requests. And so what that means is that only administrators can access this application. You've got to be in a certain role and you've got to access this application over a certain port. And then I can also stop this application. So I can stop it gracefully, which basically means if I have users that are still connected and I select when work completes, WebLogic will stop the application when there are no more HTTP requests. Force stop now is essentially that. It will kill the application regardless of in-flight work. And then stop is similar to putting it into an admin state. So the application is not available to just anybody only to administrators. So on the testing tab, WebLogic provides a bunch of links for different services within the web application that you can use to test. So you can see here that that WebLogic lists the default URL, and it's also located a JSP page. And so you'll see if your application has multiple JSP pages, they will be listed here. And you can click on any one of these and it'll take you to that address. Now, the one thing I didn't mention earlier is this class loader analysis tool. And this is something that primarily a developer might play with, but an admin could use it as well. So the class loader analysis tool, or CAT, is used to analyze a class path. So within WebLogic, there's a hierarchy and a precedence when it comes to class paths. So within WebLogic, there are multiple class loaders. There's a class loader for the JVM. There's a class loader for the domain. There's a separate class loader for applications. And so there may be times where you've deployed one library at the JVM or domain level, and you've deployed a newer version of that library or even an older version of that library at the application level. And that can sometimes cause class loader conflicts. Troubleshooting class loading conflicts can be a pain in the butt. So you can use the CAT tool to analyze what class loaders are loading what class files. And WebLogic allows you to specify in your deployment descriptor which class loader to preference and which one has priority over the other class loaders. So that's a really handy tool. Let's go ahead and click on the monitoring tab. So on the monitoring tab, we can view stats for the application. So on this web applications tab, I see statistics for that web application. So this entry here will show the context root for each application. So you can see the application is called main web app. It's on the admin server. Its state is active. And it identifies the number of servlets and sessions, total sessions and sessions high. I can go ahead and click on the servlets tab. And the servlets tab will show me all the servlets that are defined in the application. You can see here that there's 4. So I've got the main servlet, the index.jsp, and then there's a file servlet, a JSP servlet, and a shutdown servlet. And you can see how often they've been reloaded and how many times they've been invoked. Then on the sessions tab, you can see all the servlet sessions. So if I go back to my main page here, my main web app application, and click refresh, and go back to the console and refresh this page, you can see the time last access has been updated. This is the current time on my system. And there's other tabs for monitoring, such as page flows, workload. You can monitor the workload for that application. There's some thread stats here. And work managers. And work managers are used to manage workload for an application. So within WebLogic, there's actually a default work manager. And that's the one that we're using. You can see here under the work managers table, there's a default one. And a work manager allows you to prioritize work for an application or applications. And we have no Jersey applications. So if you had a REST-based application based on JAX-RS, you could see some information here associated with it. But this is not a REST-based application, so we don't see anything. So that's a really quick overview of deploying an application using the admin console and checking things out in the console. So let's go ahead and jump to deploying the same application using the WebLogic deployer tool. So I want to deploy the same application using the deployer tool. So let's go ahead and delete this application. So go ahead and click on the deployments link underneath the main structure. Check the box next to the main web app and click delete. So you'll see a message once the deployment has been deleted. So go ahead and let's switch back to our terminal window. I'm going to minimize this. Open up a new tab here, or a new terminal window. For me, it's a tab since I'm using the terminal on Mac. So we're going to use WebLogic.deployer to deploy that same web application. In order to run WebLogic deployer, I need to add my class path needs to contain the jar file for that class on my class path. So the quickest way to do this and the easiest way to do this is to source a WebLogic environment script. So there's a script called set_wls_env.sh. And if I source this script, it will define a variety of environment variables, but the one I'm most interested in is class path and Java options. And so once my class path is properly set up, I can run this weblogic.deployer command. Let's go ahead and source that environment script. So it's under Oracle Home, middleware, so it's located under Oracle Home, which is under Lab Home, Oracle Middleware, Oracle Home, WL Server, Server, bin, and the script is named set_wls_env. So we want to source this. And you can see here that it's set to my class path and my path. So once this is done, we can run the WebLogic deployer command. So the syntax for this, it's in the lab guide, but it's Java, and then the name of the class is WebLogic.deployer. And we need to tell deployer where the admin server is, because the admin server is responsible for managing the domain. And so even if we're going to deploy an application to a managed server, we have to work through the admin server first. We tell the admin server where the application source files are located and the target, where that application should be deployed. So the first parameter we're going to type in is the admin URL, and that's going to be t3:// and the URL to your admin server. So in this case, I'm on the same machine as my admin server. I'm going to use localhost, the port number, and don't specify /console here. That's only for accessing the admin console. We're going to leave that off. Dash username, which is WebLogic. And then we have to specify the password, which is dash password. And then type in the password. And then dash deploy. So a deployer can be used to do a bunch of different things, not just deploy. It can undeploy, and it can start and stop an application, and it can do an upgrade. So all the things that you saw in the admin console, you can pretty much do through the WebLogic.deployer command. So after dash deploy, you specify the fully qualified path to the web application that you want to deploy. And so that's under our application root home directory, which is U01 Udemy applications, WL server, examples, build, and then main web app. Go ahead and hit enter. And just like last time, as soon as WebLogic deploys this application, it launches a browser window for the main web app. So that's unique to this particular web application. If you were doing this on a remote server, then where the admin server was not on the machine that you're connected to. So if you had SSH'd into a server, then this page would not have come up because it wouldn't have launched the browser remotely. So let's go back to the admin console and then click on deployments again. And you can see now that the page has been refreshed, we see the main web app has been deployed. It's active, its health is okay, and everything is as it was before. So click on the main web app and take a look at, there are some differences since we didn't specify certain parameters. So when we use the admin console, we specified the staging mode explicitly and the plan staging mode explicitly and the security model explicitly. In this case, we didn't do that. So by not doing that, WebLogic.deployer defers to the WebLogic target for those staging values, for those mode values. And since we haven't changed anything, the default values for WebLogic are to use staging mode for the application source files and for the deployment plans. The default security model is DD only, deployment descriptor only. Now we can override those or explicitly set them using the command, but we just didn't specify the flags. So one more thing I want to show you. It happened too fast on my computer. As soon as the application deployed, it launched the browser window and I lost sight of my terminal window. So if you go back to your terminal window where you launched the WebLogic.deployer command, take a look at the output from when you ran that command. And you can see here that We have an initiating deploy operation for the application, and we've got some output here. And fortunately, it says completed and that the application was deployed to the admin server. And so that's it. You've successfully deployed a web application, an exploded archive, using two methods, the admin console and WebLogic deployer. If you want to learn more about the deployer command and what options are available, you can actually type java weblogic.deployer -help. That'll help. And you can see the various different parameters for deploying an application. Now you may have noticed that I specified a username and password on the command line. That may be fine for a development environment, but in a production environment, I don't want to specify a username and password in plain text in the command line. Take a look at the history. If somebody were able to get into the system and run history and take a look at the bash history, you can see that there's the username and password and the URL for logging into the server. So we just gave away the keys to the kingdom there. So if you leave the username and password parameters out and you run this command, you will be prompted for the username and password, which is far more secure. Also, you can use keys. You can generate keys and use those keys to authenticate against WebLogic. And you can also use SecureT3 or HTTPS for connecting to your admin server. And in a production environment, that is the most secure method for deploying an application or for performing any administrative function. But I'll touch on security in the lecture on security later on. And so that's it for this lab. Stay tuned for the